There are two kinds of invisible. The first is when nobody sees you. The second, the more useful kind, is when they see you and decide you don't matter. I had spent 4 months becoming the second kind inside the Desideri estate, and I had done it deliberately, because $67,400 requires a very specific quality of patience. My name is Rebecca Muller. I am 26 years old. I am a nurse. And in this house, that is all I am. My patient is Edoardo Desideri, the Commendatore's father. 71, post-stroke, left side weakness that has been recovering slowly and measurably under my hands every morning for 4 months. I arrive at 7. I administer, I monitor, I chart, I leave by 3. I do not ask questions that aren't clinical. I do not linger in corridors. I have learned the rhythms of this household the way I learn all environments, by listening more than I move, by mapping what I'm not supposed to notice until I know exactly where everything is. The staff call me the nurse. The Commendatore has seen me 4 times. He has never stopped walking. I made my peace with that in the first week. Unremarkable was the point, because somewhere on the other side of 4 months and $67,400, my brother Thomas gets his spine back. 2 compressed cervical vertebrae, a municipal authority that closed its insurance window before the damage was visible, and a 34-year-old man teaching himself to write left-handed because the right hand shakes when he's tired. That is the clock I am running on, not the estate's clock, not the Commendatore's. What I didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone else had been watching my schedule, my route. The badge clipped to my collar every morning when I left this house. Someone had been counting the gap, too, and they had a different use for it. The Desideri estate had 31 rooms that I was permitted to enter, and 2 that I wasn't. In 4 months, I had never tested the second restriction. The first, a basement level used by the Commendatore's security staff, I had identified on my 3rd day by the sound of the door, a specific magnetic release, heavier than the others, 3 floors below the east wing. The second was the study off the upper landing, which I passed each morning on the way to the patient room, and had learned, without being told, was not a corridor I entered unless summoned. I was never summoned. My world in this house was 1 room. 4 months at this salary, plus what I had saved from my previous position, and what Thomas had managed to set aside before the injury, and we were close. Not there. Close. I was counting the gap the way Thomas counted the shaking. Daily, without comment, looking for direction of travel. The direction, tonight, was rain. It had started before I cleared the estate's rear gate, coming in low and sideways from the east, the kind of rain that doesn't announce itself. I had an umbrella. It was largely decorative against this. I pulled my scrubs jacket tighter, the Holt Medical Center badge still clipped at the collar, the logo on the chest still faintly visible under the coat I'd layered over it, and walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop with my bag pressed against my hip. The streets were quiet, not empty. This city was never entirely empty, but quiet in the way a city gets when the rain is heavy enough to suggest that being outside is a choice you've made poorly. I had made it for $67,400. I kept walking. The rain was still coming down at 5:40 the next morning. I knew the time exactly because I checked my phone at the bus stop, 4 blocks from my apartment, 6 blocks from Corridor Aldea, 11 blocks from the Desideri estate, and the screen read 5:38 a.m. when the last overnight bus pulled away without me. I had missed it by 40 seconds. The next one didn't run until 6:10, which would make me late for Thomas's call and late for Eduardo's 7 o'clock medication window. Corridor Aldea saved 8 minutes. The passage ran behind the Holt Medical Center's loading bay, a covered service corridor, technically public access, used by hospital staff, linen contractors, and pharmaceutical deliveries. I had used it 6 times in 4 months. It was lit, it was covered, and it was faster than going around. I turned into it at 5:40. The overhead lights ran the length of the passage, industrial fluorescents, 2 of them cycling, one dark at the far end. The floor was dry under the awning, the rain loud on the corrugated roof. The smell was of antiseptic and damp concrete, the particular combination of any hospital-adjacent space at this hour. I was 3/4 of the way through when I heard the footsteps behind me. I had been a nurse for 4 years. You learn to read the sound of a person moving toward you, whether they're in a hurry, whether they're distracted, whether they're purposeful. These footsteps were purposeful. More than one set. I kept my pace even. My right hand found the outside of my bag strap. Hold on. The voice came from behind me and to the left simultaneously, which meant at least one of them had already been in the corridor when I entered. I had not seen him. The position near the far wall, in the shadow of the dead fluorescent, had been chosen deliberately. I stopped. I turned. 3 men. The one who had spoken was closest. Early 30s, a heavy build going soft at the edges, a jaw that carried the particular set of someone used to not being argued with. He wore a delivery contractor's vest, unzipped, over a dark shirt. His eyes went immediately to my collar, to the Holt Medical Center badge clipped there, the clinic name embossed in blue on white plastic. Holt staff, he said. Not a question. I work there in a private capacity, I said. I'm heading to a patient. He looked at the badge for another second, then at the 2 men behind me. I heard them adjust their positions, not rushing, simply closing the geometry, and back at me. Which ward? He said. I understood then. This was not a test of whether I was staff. He already knew I was staff. He was testing whether I was the specific kind of staff who had access to a specific part of the building. Private residential care, I said. Outpatient. His expression recalibrated, almost imperceptibly, but I had 4 years of reading faces for signs patients tried to hide, and his registered something landing into a position it had been waiting for. His name, I would learn later, was Nico Seri. 32. He had been running logistics for the Varro clan for 6 years, not because he believed in anything Cesare Varro believed in, but because the Varro clan had been the only structure available to him when he was 26, unemployed, and had a mother whose dialysis schedule cost more than any legitimate job in his district was paying. By the time that debt was repaid, he had become too useful to walk away from, and Cesare Varro was not a man who released useful people. The second man was Piero Fonte. 28. He had been inside twice, minor charges, both dismissed on procedural grounds, and had the particular quality of someone who had learned that the line between legal and illegal was largely a matter of who was watching. He owed Nico a favor, and Nico had called it. That was the whole of his reason for being in Corridor Aldea at 5:40 in the morning. He would say so later, in a room with a recorder running, without apparent shame. The third man was Sal Mura, 25. He was standing near the corridor entrance behind me, and he had said nothing since I arrived, which I registered without looking at him. Later I would learn that Sal had been told this was a surveillance job, confirm the nurse's access level, confirm her route, nothing physical. He had a girlfriend and a 6-month-old daughter, and he had needed the payment for the same reason everyone in these situations needed a payment. He had not been told what Nico actually intended to do with the badge. The badge, Nico said. Give it to me. It's biometric linked, I said. It won't grant access to anything without my fingerprint. I know, he said. He took a step toward me. What happened next happened in the time it takes to draw one breath. I stepped back and to the side. A nurse's reflex. The instinct to create distance when a patient becomes unpredictable. And my left shoulder caught the corridor wall. Nico reached for the lanyard at my collar and I brought my arm up, and his free hand came around and caught me across the left side of my rib cage with the flat of his forearm. Not a punch. The inside of his arm, swinging across my body as he grabbed for the badge with his other hand, but it had weight behind it, and it caught me at the wrong angle, and the sound it made, inside me, not outside, was something I had heard before in clinical contexts and recognized immediately. I dropped to one knee. The floor of Corridor Aldea was cold concrete. I put both hands flat on it and focused on the surface. Behind me, I heard Salmura say something in a low, tight voice. Nico answered him with 2 words that shut the conversation before it opened. The lanyard snapped. The badge left my collar. I breathed. Shallow. Controlled. The pain was located. Left side. Below the breast. The kind of pain that doesn't scatter but concentrates at one specific point and stays there with each breath like a question being asked repeatedly. I knew what that meant. "You didn't see us," Nico said, not loudly. "Go to your patient." He walked past me. Piero followed. Behind me, Salmura's footsteps hesitated, a full 2 seconds, longer than any other beat in the sequence, and then moved. I stayed on both hands and both knees for 60 seconds. I counted them. Then I stood up. I picked up my bag. I walked out of Corridor Aldea into the rain and stood at the edge of the Holt Medical Center's rear service road and thought about what had just happened with complete deliberate clarity. My badge was gone. It was a Holt badge, not a Desideri household credential, which meant it opened the medical center's service entrance, the supply corridor, and the private patient wing, where Eduardo Desideri received care. Which meant someone had sent 3 men to a covered passage at 5:40 in the morning to confirm that the nurse who attended the Commendatore's father had access to the private patient wing. Not to stop me from going in, to prove that someone could reach the person I went to. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. That was something I had trained for, the same way I had trained to keep my voice level when I told someone their results were not what we had hoped. Steadiness is a professional requirement, not a natural state. I called Lena. She answered on the second ring, which meant she was awake, which meant she had been waiting. "Something happened," I said. "How bad?" I pressed my free hand against my left side. The point was precise and fixed and returned with each breath. "I need you to come," I said. Lena arrived in 14 minutes. She drove a 10-year-old sedan with a cracked side mirror she'd been meaning to replace for 8 months, and she pulled up to the Holt Medical Center's rear service road with the particular speed of someone who had decided in the car that whatever she was arriving at, she was arriving ready. She got out and looked at me, not at my face first, but at the way I was standing. 4 years of watching me work had taught her the same thing. 4 years of nursing had taught me. How a person holds their body tells you more than their expression. "Where?" she said. "Left side. Below the breast." She put 2 fingers against my ribs through my coat, clinical and careful, found the point in under 10 seconds, and I made a sound I had not intended to make. "Urgent care," she said. "I need to be at Eduardo's by 7. It's 5:58. She was already steering me toward the car. "We have time." The urgent care clinic on Via Marchetti opened at 6. The intake nurse, a woman my age with the particular efficiency of someone 4 hours into a 12-hour shift, logged me in without ceremony. A physician appeared within 20 minutes. His name was Dr. Santi, the attending on duty, compact and unhurried, with reading glasses he pushed up when he wasn't actively using them. He pressed 3 points along my left rib cage and watched my face rather than his fingers. "There," he said at the second point. "Yes," I said. "I want an X-ray. I have a patient at 7. He looked at me with the expression physicians use on medical colleagues who are being unreasonable about their own injuries, a specific, weary patience. "You'll make your patient at 7, he said. "The X-ray takes 15 minutes. It took 17. He came back with the film and clipped it to the light board without preamble. "6th rib, he said. "Left lateral. You have a confirmed hairline fracture here." The pen traced a diagonal line, pale against blue-white. "The tissue around it is inflamed, but the fracture is non-displaced, nothing threatening the lung. But it is real, and every breath you take at full depth is stressing the site." I looked at the film. My own rib cracked. The clinical part of my brain noted the presentation and filed it accurately. The rest of me noted that I had a 17-minute bus ride to the estate and 7 hours of patient care ahead, and a brother in a different city who could not know this had happened yet. Treatment protocol, I said. Rest, he said. 2 weeks minimum, limited upper body movement. No lifting. Sleep on your right side, anti-inflammatories. He paused. And you should report this. I intend to, I said. He printed the imaging report. Hairline fracture, 6th rib, left lateral, non-displaced, associated intercostal inflammation, blunt force consistent with impact, and handed it to me with a prescription and a care sheet. I folded both and put them in the zippered interior pocket of my bag. First documentation. Time-stamped 6:41 a.m. Lena was waiting in the car. She handed me the anti-inflammatory without being asked. She had gone to the pharmacy 2 doors down while I was with the physician, which was exactly the kind of thing Lena did without announcing it. How bad? She said, pulling out. Hairline. Non-displaced. I looked at the window. It'll hold. It'll hold if you rest it. I know. Rebecca. I know, I said. I can't rest it yet. She drove in silence for 2 blocks. Then, who were they? I don't know yet. Yet, she said. The same word, same register, the sister version of a clinical assessment. They wanted the badge, I said. Not for access, for proof of access. Someone wanted to know that the nurse attending Eduardo Desideri could be reached. Lena was quiet for the remaining 4 blocks. When she pulled up to the estate's rear service entrance, she kept the engine running and said, You're going to tell someone. Today, I said. Before your shift ends. Yes. She looked at me. I looked at her. We had been having the compressed version of every important conversation since we were children. Fewer words, same meaning. Thomas's call is at 9, she said. I'll have my phone on silent, I said. Tell him it was a long shift. She nodded. I got out. She waited until I was through the gate. I heard the car idle until the lock clicked behind me, and then she drove away. Signora Gallo was in the main corridor with a tablet, and the expression she wore when the morning had already produced something she hadn't scheduled. She looked at me. At the time, 6:58, 2 minutes under, and then at the specific way I was moving, which was not my usual way. You're on time, she said, as though she had expected otherwise. Yes, I said. I need to speak with whoever manages household security. After the morning session. She looked at me with the sharpness of a woman who had been running a large household for a long time, and had learned to read the difference between a staff problem and something else. That would be Ronaldo, she said, head of security. A pause. I'll let him know. Thank you, I said. I went upstairs to Eduardo's room. He was awake and dressed, and sitting in the chair by the window, which was where he preferred his mornings since the left side strength had started returning. He looked at me when I came in and said, with the measured directness of a man who had been powerful for 60 years and had not entirely surrendered that as a quality in retirement, You're moving differently. Long morning, I said. He accepted this with the dignity of a man who had learned at 71 and post-stroke that some information arrived when it was ready. Sit down before you start, he said. The medications can wait 2 minutes. I sat. That was the first kindness of the day. It was enough to hold on to. Ronaldo found me at noon in the staff anteroom off the east corridor. A compact man in his 50s, with a former military quality of economy that reminded me of the senior surgeons I had worked under. He listened to the full account without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "The badge opens the private patient wing." "Yes," I said, "which means this wasn't about you." "I know." He looked at the imaging report I had placed on the table between us. He read it with the same economy he had given my account. No detail skipped, nothing performed. "The Commendatore will need to hear this," he said. My pulse registered it before I did. Once, harder than the room required. "When?" I said. "Tonight," he said. "After his evening meeting, 9 o'clock. He stood, picked up the imaging report and said, "I'll need a copy of the X-ray film as well." "I'll bring it tonight," I said. He left. I sat in the staff anteroom for another 3 minutes and thought about what it meant to have spent 4 months being entirely invisible in this household, and to have one morning at 5:40 in Corridor Aldea make that position permanently unavailable. Whatever came next, I was no longer unremarkable. I was not sure yet whether that was better. The Commendatore's evening meeting ran until 8:50. I knew this because Signora Gallo told me, without being asked, when she passed me in the East Corridor at 8:45. It was the kind of information she would not have volunteered 4 months ago, or this morning, for that matter. Something in the household's assessment of me had already shifted before I had said a word to the man it belonged to. I waited in the staff anteroom with the X-ray film in its envelope, and the imaging report clipped to the front, and my bag across my lap, and the anti-inflammatory doing approximately half of what it was supposed to do. Rinaldo came at 9:02. "He's ready." I followed him down the interior corridor, not the service wing, the private one, the dark wood and thick carpet that absorbed sound completely. I had passed this corridor's entrance every morning for 4 months on the way to the east staircase and had never turned into it. The study door was closed. Rinaldo knocked once. "In." He opened it and stepped back. The room was large and spare, a desk of dark wood at the center, clean except for a lamp and a single open folder. Bookshelves along 2 walls, a standing lamp in the corner, 2 chairs across from the desk. The Commendatore was standing at the window, not looking out, standing with his back to the room in the posture of a man whose mind had been working for the past hour and whose body had found a position to wait in while it finished. He turned. I had seen him 4 times in 4 months. Corridor crossings, nothing more. Distance had made him readable only in outline. Here, in this room, with 1 lamp and 12 feet between us, the outline resolved into something more specific, taller than the corridor suggested, with the quality of sustained attention that some men develop when they have spent years making decisions that cost things. He looked at me the way I imagined he looked at everything, completely, and without showing what he was doing with what he found. "You're the nurse," he said. "Rebecca Muller," I said. "Yes." Something moved in his expression, brief, almost imperceptible. The recalibration of a man realizing a name existed where he had filed a function. "Sit down," he said. I sat. He remained standing, moving from the window to the edge of the desk, not behind it, at it. The lamp threw his face into partial shadow. "Rinaldo gave me the summary," he said. "I want it from you." I gave it to him. The same account I had given Rinaldo, but this time I did not stop at the facts. I told him what I had understood in the corridor, that they had come for the badge not as a means of entry, but as a demonstration. That someone wanted him to know that the line between his father's care and the outside world passed through a person who could be touched. He listened without moving. When I finished, he was silent for 8 seconds. I counted. "The Holt badge opens the private patient wing," he said. "Yes, and the supply corridor and the service entrance. Which means my father's medication schedule is accessible to anyone with that badge." "Yes." His jaw tightened once, held, released. The only thing in his expression that moved. "You went to Eduardo's session this morning," he said. "After this." His 7 o'clock medication window couldn't be missed. "With a fractured rib." "Hairline," I said. "It's manageable." He looked at me with something that was not admiration and not pity, but more careful and more considered than either. He reached across the desk and picked up the imaging report, Ronaldo had placed it there before I arrived, and read it where he stood. He set it down. You documented this immediately. Time-stamped 6:41 a.m., I said. I have the original and 3 copies. Keep all of them, he said. I intend to. He moved around to the front of the desk and stood with his arms crossed, not defensively, the way a man crosses his arms when he is closing off, but as a physical anchor, the way you hold something still when you are thinking about something else entirely. My father doesn't know, he said. No, I told him it was a long morning. He'll ask again. I know, I said. He notices things. Something moved through his expression then. The kind of thing that surfaces when a person hears an observation about someone they love from a person they had previously not accounted for. Yes, he said. He does. A silence that was different from the others in the room. Not the silence of assessment, but something quieter beneath it. Your route to the estate, he said. It changes tomorrow. Ronaldo will arrange an escort. You don't use Corridor Aldea again. I understand. And the badge replacement. I'll have Holt's administration notified tonight. Your access tier will be reissued under a dual authorization protocol. Nothing moves in or out of my father's wing without a second credential confirmation. He said this the way he said everything, as resolution rather than proposal. The decision had been made before the conversation began, and the conversation was simply the delivery mechanism. There's one more thing, I said. He looked at me. Whoever sent those men knew my route, I said. I've used Corridor Aldea 6 times in 4 months. 3 of those times were schedule changes, last-minute shifts that weren't part of a fixed pattern. They would have needed access to either my schedule or the household's to know I'd be there this morning. The stillness in the room changed quality. You're saying there's an internal source, he said. I'm saying it's possible, I said. I'm not in a position to say more than that. He held my eyes. The lamp hummed between us. You are now, he said. It was the most words he had given any single sentence all evening. I understood their weight. Not as permission, but as reclassification. He was not telling me I could speak freely. He was telling me that what I said would be heard differently than it had been 4 months ago, and that the difference was permanent. All right, I said. I stood. He nodded, small, contained, and I walked to the door. Muller. I stopped. The copies of the imaging report, he said, and the urgent care documentation. Keep them somewhere that isn't this house. I turned enough to see him. He was looking at the X-ray film still clipped to the envelope, not at me. Already done, I said. I left. In the corridor, I walked with my bag over my right shoulder, and my left arm held slightly in, the automatic compensation that had started this morning and would be with me for weeks, and thought about what it meant that I had spent 4 months being unremarkable in this house, and had spent one conversation being told I was the opposite. In this house, being seen was not safety, but it was better than what came for you when nobody was watching. The escort was a man named Fausto, one of Ronaldo's team, introduced to me at the estate service gate the following morning with a single sentence, I walk with you. Mid-40s, unremarkable in the specific way that required professional cultivation, with the kind of stillness that came from years of watching, rather than acting. He met me at my building's front entrance at 5:20. We did not use Corridor Aldea. We took the long route, around the Holt Medical Center's perimeter, through the open market square, down the Via Clement, and arrived at the estate 7 minutes later than my previous schedule. 7 minutes. I adjusted Eduardo's medication window accordingly, and noted the change in the chart without comment. Eduardo noticed anyway. You're later than usual, he said, from his chair by the window. New route, I said. He looked at me with the directness of a man who had spent 71 years reading people, and had lost none of that acuity to the stroke. My son's doing. Yes. He accepted this with a nod that held both acknowledgement and something that might have been relief. The particular relief of a parent who has spent years watching a child carry everything alone and has just seen evidence that the carrying has a shape. He didn't ask more. I didn't offer more. We understood each other in that way, Eduardo and I. The clinical relationship had become something more textured in 4 months, not friendship exactly, but the specific trust that develops when someone sees you at your most vulnerable every morning and handles it with professional steadiness. On the 3rd day, Ronaldo pulled security footage from 2 cameras covering Corridor Aldea and the adjacent service road. He showed me the stills in his office, a room off the ground floor corridor, organized with the precision of someone who distrusted disorder as a professional matter. 3 frames, the corridor entrance at 5:37, 5:38, 5:41. The man with the contractor's vest visible in 2, a partial face, 1 clear image of the badge in his hand after. The vest logo, I said. That's a Varro Logistics contractor uniform. Ronaldo looked at me. I worked at the Holt Medical Center for 2 years before this position, I said. Varro Logistics handles pharmaceutical deliveries to the private patient wing. I signed for their manifests 40 times. He was already writing. You recognize the specific logo. The bird on the left breast pocket, I said. It's their regional division mark. Standard logistics wouldn't have it. Only the medical supply contractors. He pulled the footage frame up on his screen and enlarged the vest pocket. The mark was partially obscured by the jacket's unzipped lapel, but the upper half, a stylized wing, 3 feathers, was visible. Varro, he said. Not a question anymore. Cesare Varro runs the logistics division, I said. I know the company name from manifests. I don't know who he is beyond that. Ronaldo's expression shifted by 1 degree, the degree that meant the information had landed into a context I didn't yet have. I'll brief the Commendatore this evening, he said. You'll be there. Cesare Varro, I learned that evening in the study, was not simply a logistics contractor. The Commendatore told me this, standing at the desk, not in explanation, but in the compressed way he gave information that required me to understand the full shape of a problem. Varro had held the Holt Medical Center's pharmaceutical supply contract for 11 years. In that time, the contract had grown from regional distribution to full medical supply chain management across 4 hospital systems in the city. The revenue was legitimate. The infrastructure it provided was not exclusively used for legitimate purposes. He moves other things through the same channels, the Commendatore said. The medical supply corridors, I said. Service entrances, loading bays, staff access points. Yes. I thought about the manifests I had signed, 40 of them over 2 years. The Varro driver, always punctual, always correct documentation, always the right seals on the right containers. He's been using the Holt access points as a transit corridor, I said. For years. A pause. My father's admission to the private patient wing placed a new variable in that corridor, a nurse with regular access and a predictable schedule. He needed to know if I was a risk, I said, whether I'd noticed something on the manifests, whether I could be used or needed to be neutralized. The Commendatore looked at me across the desk. Which were you? Neither, I said. I signed the manifests and went back to my patients. I wasn't looking for anything because I didn't know there was anything to find. And now you do. Now I do, I said. A silence. The lamp between us. Varro's motive for the badge wasn't only intelligence, the Commendatore said. He wanted leverage. A credential that linked the Desideri household to a criminal transit corridor, in case he ever needed to negotiate from a defensive position. If the corridor was ever investigated, the badge would put a Desideri-connected employee at the scene. Yes. I thought about the careful deliberateness of it. Not brute intimidation, but architecture. building a structure before you needed it, so it was standing when you did. That was not a man who operated on impulse. He's been planning for a defensive scenario for a while, I said. Since my father was admitted, the Commendatore said. 4 months. 4 months. The same 4 months I had been invisible in this house, attending a patient, signing manifests, walking through a corridor. I had been a variable in someone else's calculation the entire time without knowing it. The internal source question took 4 more days to resolve. It resolved quietly, the way these things resolved in this household. Not with confrontation, but with the methodical elimination of access points until the remaining one was obvious. Rinaldo cross-referenced my schedule changes against the household's internal calendar system. 3 of the 6 times I had used Corridor Aldea corresponded with last-minute shift adjustments logged in the medical care coordination file. That file had 4 authorized readers. 2 were Rinaldo and the Commendatore. 1 was Signora Gallo. The 4th was a junior household administrator named Prete, 29, 18 months in the position, responsible for coordinating the medical care calendar with the estate's broader schedule. Prete had accessed the file 11 minutes before each of the 3 relevant schedule changes had been relayed to Varro's logistics coordinator. The access logs showed it. Rinaldo showed me the logs without editorializing, the way he showed me everything. He wasn't a Varro plant, Rinaldo said. He was a man with a gambling debt and a creditor who found the right pressure point. Varro found the debt, I said. Varro's people found it. It's how they operate. They don't recruit. They discover. Preda was removed from the household that afternoon. Not loudly. His access was revoked at 11 a.m. His personal items were collected and delivered to his apartment, and a standard termination notice was filed through the household's administrative records. No police. No charges. The Commendatore had a code, and part of that code was that a man who had been coerced rather than corrupted was handled differently from one who had chosen it. I learned this from Rinaldo, not from the Commendatore directly. But that evening, passing the study on my way to the east staircase, I heard the Commendatore's voice through the soundproofed door, not the words, only the register. And it was lower and less controlled than his usual speaking voice, the specific register of a man who is managing something that has cost him something personal. Eduardo had trusted Prede with his medical schedule. That was what it had cost. I did not stop at the door. I kept walking. Some things you filed and did not examine in the corridor. The identification of the 3 men happened on the 8th day. Rinaldo had them in a room I had not previously been aware of, below the east wing, past the magnetic door I had identified on my 3rd day by its sound. Not a police room, a household room, which meant it operated by household rules, and the household rules were not the same as anyone else's. He brought me to the observation window at 10 in the morning. 3 men, 3 chairs, the particular stillness of people who had spent several days understanding the dimensions of their situation. I identified them in under 30 seconds. The first by his build and the contractor vest. Different vest, same logo position. The second by height, the way he holds his arms. The third... I paused. The 3rd man was young, younger than the corridor had suggested. He was sitting with his hands flat on the table and his eyes fixed at a point 6 inches in front of them, the posture of someone managing something interior. I heard him more than saw him, but the sound he made when the first one struck me, I know that sound. It's him. Rinaldo noted all 3 confirmations and went in. I watched through the glass. It was methodical. Rinaldo placed a folder on the table and opened it to the Corridor Aldea footage, the contractor vest, the partial face, the badge in hand, and then, one by one, the documentation chain. The Varro logistics registration, the pharmaceutical supply contract, the access logs from the Holt Medical Center. He laid each page down with the patience of a man building a structure he intended to be unargued with, giving each of them time to understand how much was already known before he asked for what wasn't. Nico Seri held the longest. He studied each document with the flat, careful attention of someone performing composure. Then Ronaldo placed the final page, a financial record, numbers I couldn't read from the glass, and Nico looked at it for 4 seconds. His jaw moved once. Then he looked at his hands. He started talking. 6 years with the Varro operation. Dialysis costs for his mother, a debt that became service that became permanence. He said this without requesting sympathy. A statement of record, the way a man reports a fact about a life he has stopped arguing with. He described the instruction for Corridor Aldea in precise terms. Confirm the nurse's access level. Retrieve the badge. Deliver it to a Varro coordinator by 6 a.m. He named the coordinator. He did not name Cesare Varro. That omission was itself a piece of information, the one boundary Nico Seri had maintained, and Ronaldo noted it without pressing. Piero Fante was briefer. He had been called in as a favor to Nico. He described it with the flat pragmatism of a man who had been making small expedient decisions for so long that he had lost the ability to register their cumulative weight. He was not ashamed and not defiant. He was simply present, answering questions, waiting to understand what the answers would cost him. Salmura spoke last and said the most. He had been told it was surveillance. Confirm the access level, nothing physical. He had needed the payment. His daughter was 6 months old. The rent on his apartment had increased twice in 8 months, and a man from the Varro operation had appeared in his neighborhood the way those men appeared, already knowing what you needed, and already having the terms written. He said all of this in the voice of someone who had been rehearsing it since the morning in Corridor Aldea. When the job had become something other than what he had been told, she went down, he said. I didn't know that was going to happen. Ronaldo said, But you stayed. A silence. Then, I didn't know what else to do. He answered every subsequent question without hesitation. The briefing location, the time, the exact phrase Nico had used when describing the job to him, and one piece beyond what Ronaldo had asked for. That the Varro coordinator who had received the badge had logged it under a reference number in the logistics system, the same system used for pharmaceutical manifest tracking. The reference number was in the confession. It would appear again. Ronaldo brought me the summaries that afternoon. I read them in the staff anteroom with my left arm held close, the anti-inflammatory at its daily ceiling, and thought about 3 men in 3 chairs and the specific architecture of how each of them had arrived there. Not evil, not even particularly chosen. Just 3 different configurations of pressure applied to 3 different weaknesses at the right moment, by a man who had made an industry of knowing where the weaknesses were. The coordinator's name, I said to Ronaldo. The one Nico named. We have him. The reference number Mora gave you. It's in the Holt manifest system. Ronaldo looked at me. If the badge was logged as a pharmaceutical delivery item, it has a manifest entry, I said. Manifest entries at Holt require a receiving signature. There's a paper trail from Corridor Aldea to wherever the badge ended up, logged under standard delivery protocols. Ronaldo was already on his phone before I finished the sentence. I heard him repeat the reference number to someone. A pause. Then, pull every manifest entry under that reference going back 18 months. He hung up and looked at me with the expression I had now learned to identify as his reclassification look, the version he used when information arrived from a direction he hadn't expected. How do you know the manifest system? He said. I used it for 2 years, I said. Every pharmaceutical delivery to the private patient wing required a nurse's signature. I signed 40 manifests. I know how the entries are structured. The Commendatore needs to know this tonight, he said. I assumed, I said. That evening I passed the Commendatore in the East Corridor on the way to Ronaldo's briefing. He was coming from the upper landing. No jacket, which I had not seen before, a quality of motion that was slightly less managed than his usual. Not disheveled. Just the version of a man that exists when he believes no one important is watching. He saw me and stopped. Muller. Sir. My father asked about you this morning. he said. After the session, he said, a brief pause in which something moved through his expression and was controlled before it surfaced. He said, you have the kind of steadiness that doesn't perform. I didn't know what to do with that. I held it. He's a perceptive man, I said. He's the most perceptive person I know, he said, with a directness that had no management layer around it, the way he only spoke in the study, and only sometimes. We stood in the corridor for a moment that was slightly longer than the exchange required. The manifest reference number, he said. Ronaldo told me. That was your observation. The system was familiar, I said. It was the right observation at the right moment. A pause. It's not the first one. He said it plainly, without ornamentation. An acknowledgement delivered the way he delivered things that mattered, with the minimum words required and no performance around them. Then he walked on. I stood in the corridor for 3 more seconds before following. The manifest trail took 3 days to follow to its end. Ronaldo's contact at the Holt Medical Center pulled every entry under the reference number Sal Mora had given. 18 months of logistics records, cross-referenced against the pharmaceutical delivery manifests I had spent 2 years signing. The trail was not hidden. It had been built to look ordinary, which was more effective than hiding it. 41 manifest entries, each logged under standard delivery protocols, each carrying a receiving signature from a legitimate Holt staff member. The items listed were real, the quantities were not. The difference between what was listed and what was actually delivered represented, across 18 months, a significant volume of something that was not pharmaceutical equipment. Ronaldo put the summary on the desk in front of the Commendatore without editorializing. The Commendatore read it standing, which was how he read everything that required a decision. When he set it down, he looked at me. You signed 3 of these manifests, he said. Yes. I checked the reference numbers this afternoon. 3 of the 41 entries carry my signature. The listed quantities on those 3 are accurate. I checked what I received against what I signed. You can verify that. The Holt receiving logs are time-stamped and photographed, I said. Every delivery is documented on intake. My 3 entries have photographs of the actual delivery. They'll match the manifest exactly. He nodded once. Then your signatures are clean. Yes. Varro knew that before he sent anyone to Corridor Aldea, he said. He pulled your records before he moved. That's why the instruction to Seri was to confirm access level and retrieve the badge, not to coerce you. You weren't a risk to him. You were a tool. I had understood this intellectually since the study, the first night. Hearing it stated plainly was a different thing. The particular quality of being told you were chosen as a variable rather than a person, that your 4 months of careful invisible competence had registered on someone's ledger as useful rather than irrelevant. The badge was the tool, I said. I was the mechanism to obtain it. Yes, he said, without softening it. I appreciated that. In this house, precision was a form of respect. Cesare Varro's first countermove came on the 11th day. He filed a formal complaint with the Holt Medical Center's board of directors, alleging that a private nurse contracted through the estate had accessed restricted pharmaceutical manifest records without authorization and shared proprietary logistics data with a third party. The complaint named me. Ronaldo told me at noon. He placed a copy of the filing on the table in front of me. The Holt letterhead, the complaint number, my name in the second paragraph with the specific allegation in clinical administrative language. I read it twice. He's trying to have my access revoked, I said. He's trying to have your credibility revoked, Ronaldo said. If the board acts on this, any testimony you give about the manifests becomes challengeable. A nurse under investigation for data breach is not a reliable witness. He moves fast, I said. He moves when he's compressed, Ronaldo said. The manifest trail compressed him. This is his response. I looked at the filing again. My name. The precise language of a man who had constructed an accusation. In the same careful architectural style, he constructed everything. built to look reasonable, built to function whether or not it was true. The Holt receiving photographs, I said. The 3 entries with my signature. If those photographs are filed with the board as part of my response, the complaint fails. You can't allege unauthorized access when the records show the access was authorized and accurate. We're already preparing the response, Rinaldo said. The Commendatore's legal team was briefed this morning. He'll know the response is coming, I said. The photographs are the obvious counter. He filed knowing we had them. Rinaldo looked at me. He didn't file to win this round, I said. He filed to slow us down. Every day the board complaint is active. The Holt administration limits my access out of procedural caution. I can't pull additional manifest records while I'm under review. He's buying time. A pause. How long does the board review take? Standard procedure is 14 days, I said. I worked there for 2 years. I know the protocol. Rinaldo's expression shifted, not dramatically, but in the direction of a man who had just recalculated a timeline. I'll tell the Commendatore, he said. The Commendatore resolved the board complaint in 4 days. I did not ask how. I understood, from the way Rinaldo described the resolution, the board chair received clarifying information and withdrew the complaint from active review, that the Desideri family's position in this city extended to places I had not yet mapped, and that the board chair was one of them. What I noted was the cost. Not financial. The Commendatore had called in something, a favor, a relationship, a pressure point, that he would not have used for a minor matter. The board chair's cooperation had a price that would come due in some other form at some other time, and the Commendatore had paid it to keep my access intact. He did not tell me this. I assembled it from the pieces available. That evening I found him at the base of the east staircase, a rare location, not the study, not the corridor. He was looking at the framed estate record on the wall, a formal property document mounted in a dark frame, the Desideri name at the top in a typeface that communicated several generations of permanence. He glanced at me when I reached the bottom of the stairs. The board complaint, I said. The resolution cost you something. Most resolutions do, he said. I'm aware of that. I paused. I want to know what I owe. He turned from the framed document and looked at me directly. Nothing, he said. That's not how cost works, I said. A silence. Something moved in his expression, not the controlled recalibration I had catalogued, but a different quality, the brief surface of something that lived further in. My father's care is not a cost I divide, he said. What protects it protects him. What I spend on that is not a debt I assign. I looked at him. He looked at me. The staircase held its quiet around us. All right, I said. He nodded. Once, small, the contained version, and turned back to the framed document. I went upstairs. In the east corridor, I pressed my left hand against my side. The 6th rib still present, still returning with each full breath, and thought about a man who stood at a framed document in his own house and looked at his family name the way other people look at something they're not sure they've earned. That was the thing about this house. Everything in it carried weight. Even the things that looked like they were standing still. The Holt Medical Center's radiology department opened at 7:30. I went on the 14th day, before my shift, while Fausto waited on the pavement outside with his hands in his pockets, and the particular patience of a man for whom waiting was professional, rather than inconvenient. The department was quiet at this hour. 2 technicians, a reception desk, the low hum of equipment in standby. The technician who handled my imaging was efficient and impersonal. She positioned me, noted the injury site I indicated, and took 4 images of the left lateral thorax. Results in 40 minutes, she said. I sat in the waiting area. Fausto had come in from the cold and taken a chair near the entrance, reading nothing, watching everything. Through the window, the city was doing what it did at 7:50 in the morning, moving, indifferent, unaware. 38 minutes later, the radiologist came out. Her name was Dr. Farini, a woman in her late 40s with reading glasses on a cord, and the measured delivery of someone who had learned that the information she gave required stillness from the giver. She led me to the consultation room and clipped the film to the light board without preamble. "Left lateral," she said. "6th rib." The pen traced a line, diagonal, thin, pale against the blue-white of the bone. "Confirmed hairline fracture here. The fracture line is clean, no displacement, no secondary fragmentation. But the intercostal tissue adjacent to the site is significantly inflamed." I looked at the film. 14 days of managed pain resolved into a pale diagonal line on a light board. "The inflammation is worse than it should be at this stage," Dr. Farini said. "Which tells me the fracture has been active. Movement, compensation, probably not enough rest." "I've been working," I said. She looked at me over her glasses with the expression physicians use when they want to say obviously without saying it. "Full rest protocol. 2 weeks minimum from today. No lifting, no twisting, no overhead reach. Sleep exclusively on your right side. The breathing exercises I'm going to give you are not optional. At 14 days without them, you're at risk for secondary pulmonary complications from the shallow breathing pattern your body has been defaulting to." She printed the imaging report. 2 pages, specific and clinical. "Confirmed hairline fracture, 6th rib, left lateral, non-displaced, intercostal tissue inflammation, consistent with sustained activity post-injury, blunt force origin," and handed it to me with a care sheet and a revised prescription. "One question," I said. "Realistic full recovery timeline." 8 weeks from today if you rest properly," she said. 12 if you continue as you have been." I thanked her. I took the film. I put the report in the zippered interior pocket of my bag, next to the urgent care documentation from 14 days ago. 2 reports now, both time-stamped, both documenting the same fracture at the same location, 14 days apart, showing progression consistent with a patient who had been managing an injury rather than treating it. The fracture had been growing its own paper trail while I carried it. Fausto stood when I came back to the waiting area. "All right?" he said. "All right," I said. We walked to the estate. 8 weeks of recovery ahead, if I did everything correctly. I was not going to do everything correctly, and we both knew it. But the timeline existed, and I had filed it. The morning session with Eduardo was lighter than usual. His left side coordination had improved to the point where the more demanding exercises were becoming routine, and routine, for Eduardo, created the space for conversation. He had been waiting to have one. "You've been guarding something in your left side for 2 weeks, he said, when I was charting at the small desk by the window. "Rib," I said. "I had it imaged this morning. Hairline fracture. Healing." "From the corridor incident," he said. Not a question. I looked at him. He held my eyes with the direct patience of a man who had decided he was owed honesty in this room. "Yes," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the garden was mid-morning gray, the hedges still wet from overnight rain. "My son told me about the badge," he said. "Not everything. Enough. I assumed he would." "He doesn't tell me things to inform me," Eduardo said. "He tells me things when he has decided I'm involved whether I know it or not. The distinction matters to him." A pause. "It matters to me too." I set down the chart. "You've been careful with me since January," he said. "Professional, correct. Better than that, actually. You're a very good nurse, which is not the same thing as a careful one. But you've been carrying this for 2 weeks, and you didn't say anything because you didn't want to worry me." "That's part of the job," I said. "It's part of the job you chose," he said. "That's different." He looked at his left hand, the one that still moved slightly less smoothly than the right, the evidence of what had brought me here. "What's your brother's name?" I paused. Thomas. And the surgery. Spinal decompression, scheduled for next month if the funding holds. He nodded once, the same contained nod I had now seen in 2 generations of this family. It will hold, he said. I looked at him. He looked back with the calm of a man who had just stated a fact rather than made a promise, and who understood the difference. I picked up the chart and went back to work. The Commendatore came to find me at noon. Not through Ronaldo. Not through Signora Gallo. He came himself, which I had learned was the distinction he made when something required directness rather than delegation. He found me in the staff anteroom with the imaging report open on the table. I had been comparing the 2 documents, the urgent care report from day 1 and the radiology report from this morning, noting the progression. And he sat down across from me without preamble. He looked at the 2 reports, then at me. 6th rib, he said. Yes. Confirmed today. The urgent care physician suspected it on day 1. The radiology confirms it. Non-displaced, which is the favorable outcome, but the inflammation is worse than it should be at 2 weeks, because I haven't rested it properly. He was quiet for a moment. The anteroom was small, and the table between us was smaller than the desk in the study, and the absence of the lamp and the formality of that room made this conversation a different register. You've been working through a confirmed fracture for 14 days, he said. It's manageable, I said. That is not the same as acceptable. I looked at him. He held my eyes with the expression that was not anger, something more complicated. The specific frustration of a man who has been operating under incomplete information and has just discovered the gap was larger than he knew. I need this position, I said, plainly, no performance. I know, he said. Thomas's surgery window opens in 3 weeks. The funding is almost there, Eduardo said. I stopped. I had not intended to say that. He held very still. My father said what? That the funding would hold, I said. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask him to. A silence. He looked at the table for a moment, not at the documents, at the surface. The particular look of a man receiving information about something he had not authorized and has decided not to be angry about. The amount, he said. I hesitated. Rebecca. The first time he had used my name. Low, without display. $67,400, I said. Thomas's injury was logged as minor at intake. The insurance window closed before the neurological damage was properly assessed. The municipal authority offered $12,000 as settlement. We've been managing the gap since February. He absorbed this the way he absorbed everything, completely, without visible reaction, the processing happening somewhere interior. How much remains? He said. 19,000, roughly, between what I've saved here and what Thomas had set aside. I paused. 3 more weeks at this rate, and it's covered. He was quiet for long enough that I counted. 6 seconds, 7, 8. It's covered now, he said. I looked at him. Consider it a medical advance against your continued position here, he said. The paperwork will come through Ronaldo's office. It will be documented, transparent, and repayable at terms you set. He held my eyes. This is not charity. It is a household protecting an asset it cannot afford to lose to a debt that should never have existed. Something moved in my chest. Not the rib, something adjacent to it, older and more complicated. I kept it out of my face with the same discipline I had been keeping everything out of my face for 14 days. I don't want to owe this house more than I already do, I said. You owe this house nothing, he said. You have protected my father's care, identified a threat we had not seen, provided evidence that has already advanced 3 separate lines of investigation, and done all of it while working through a fracture you didn't report because you needed the income. He set both hands flat on the table, a gesture I had not seen from him before. a kind of deliberate stillness. The debt runs in the other direction. I looked at his hands on the table, then at his face. "All right," I said. He nodded, once, contained, and picked up the imaging report. He read it fully, the way he read everything, and set it down with the care of someone handling a document they intend to keep. "Rest the rib," he said. "Eduardo's schedule can be adjusted for 2 days," he said. "Ronaldo will cover the medication checks. You rest." He stood. "That's not a suggestion." He left. I sat in the anteroom for a while after that, the 2 reports on the table in front of me. 14 days of documentation about a fracture I had been carrying like a debt, proof of something I had not asked to survive but had survived anyway. The advance confirmation came through Ronaldo's office at 4 that afternoon. A transfer notice on Desideri household letterhead, time-stamped 1622, reference number DHR 0031, Muller, amount $19,000, notation, medical advance, repayment schedule attached, authorized by Desideri Household Administration. I photographed it. I sent the photograph to Lena without explanation. She replied in 40 seconds, "I'm calling Thomas." I put the phone face down on the table and breathed, carefully, because the 6th rib was still present and still mine, and let the weight across my shoulders adjust to a different distribution. Lighter, by exactly $19,000. I rested for 2 days. This was harder than the fracture. The second day, I spent most of the morning in the small staff sitting room on the ground floor with Dr. Farini's care sheet and the breathing exercises, doing them with the concentrated attention of someone learning that neglect accumulates interest. In through 4 counts, slow and deliberate against the resistance of inflamed tissue. Out through 6. The 6th rib registering each cycle like a fixed point on a map I had been navigating around, and was now finally acknowledging. Signora Gallo appeared in the doorway at 10. She looked at me doing the exercises and said nothing for a moment. Then, "There's tea on the kitchen counter, the good kind. Eduardo requested it be left for you." She left before I could respond. I went to the kitchen. The tea was there. A specific blend, the kind Eduardo drank in the mornings, the one he had once mentioned his wife had preferred. It was still hot. Someone had timed it. I stood at the kitchen counter and drank it, and thought about a 71-year-old man in a chair by a window who had spent 4 months watching me handle his medications and his exercises, and his difficult mornings, and had decided, somewhere in that watching, that I was worth a cup of tea and a promise. That was the second kindness of this house. It arrived, like the first, without announcement. Lena called that evening. "Thomas's surgery is confirmed," she said. "The specialist's office called this afternoon. The slot is protected. 2 weeks from Thursday." I was sitting on the edge of my bed with the care sheet on the table beside me. I read the confirmation in her voice. Not just the information, but the quality of relief beneath it. The specific sound of a person who has been holding something tightly for a very long time and has just been told they can put it down. "How did he take it?" I said. He didn't say much. A pause. He cried a little. He didn't want me to mention that. I won't mention it. "Rebecca." Her voice shifted. "What is this place?" I thought about how to answer that. The household, the Commendatore at the table with his hands flat on the surface, Eduardo and the tea, Fausto 2 paces behind me every morning, the document in my bag with the reference number and the amount. "It's complicated," I said, "but it's real, all of it." "Are you safe?" "I'm safer than I was," I said. "That's not nothing." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The fracture." "Healing," I said. "I rested today. Both days." "Both whole days?" "Mostly." "Rebecca." "Lena." A beat. Then she laughed, the short, compressed version she used when something was both frustrating and relieving at the same time. I heard it and felt something loosen in my chest, carefully, around the fixed point of the 6th rib. "Sleep on your right side," she said. "I know." "Tell me you know." "I know," I said. "Good night." She hung up. I lay down on my right side in the dark and listened to my own breathing, and thought about the particular quality of a problem that has been present so long you had stopped measuring it against its absence, and what it felt like when the absence finally arrived. It felt like this: quiet, specific, not dramatic, enough. I returned to Eduardo's care on the 3rd morning. He looked at me when I came in and said, "Better." Not a question. An assessment. "Better," I confirmed. He held out his left arm for the blood pressure cuff with the dignified patience of a man who has made peace with being tended. I fitted the cuff and ran the reading and noted it in the chart. Improved again, the 3rd consecutive week of marginal but consistent improvement, and thought about how much of recovery was simply this: showing up, doing the thing correctly, measuring the direction of travel. The Commendatore passed the open door at 7:20. He slowed without stopping, a fractional reduction in pace, the kind that could be read as coincidence. His eyes went to Eduardo first, then to me, then to the chart in my hand. A 3-point assessment completed in 2 seconds. Then he walked on. Eduardo watched him go with the particular expression of a father who has been observing his child's behavior for 50 years and has recently noted a new variable. "He checks this room twice in the morning now," Eduardo said, when the footsteps had faded. "He didn't before." I focused on the chart. "He's always been careful about your care," I said. "He was careful before," Eduardo said. "This is different." A pause, weighted with the precision of a man who chose words slowly and meant all of them. "He checks the room, and then he checks the room again." I made a note in the chart that did not require making and said nothing. Eduardo said nothing further. He had made his point with the economy of someone who knew when to stop. Outside the window, the garden was beginning to catch the morning light, the hedges defining themselves out of gray, the gravel path between them becoming specific and pale, the day settling into its shape. I finished the chart. I prepared the medications. I did my job with the same care I had given it every morning for 4 months, in a house that had shifted around me without my permission into something I had not expected and had not finished understanding. The 6th rib was still present. The timeline said 8 weeks. I was at 2. 6 more to go, and the distance between here and there felt for the first time like something I could actually measure. Thomas's surgery happened on a Thursday. Lena texted me at 7:51 when he went through the theater doors. A single line: "He's in." I read it in Eduardo's room during the morning session, standing at the medication cart with my back to my patient so he wouldn't see my face do whatever it was doing. I heard his voice behind me. "Good news." Not a question. Eduardo had learned, over 4 months, to read the quality of my stillness the way I had learned to read his. "My brother," I said. Surgery started. "Sit down for a moment," he said. I sat. We didn't speak. Outside the window, the garden was holding its late morning quiet, the hedges casting long, precise shadows across the gravel. Eduardo had his hands folded in his lap, and his eyes on the middle distance, the posture of a man keeping someone company without crowding them. That was the 3rd kindness. It arrived, like the others, without announcement. Lena called 3 hours and 14 minutes later. I took it in the east corridor, phone pressed to my ear, my free hand flat against the wall. "Clean decompression," she said. "Surgeon's words. No secondary complications. Thomas is in recovery." I pressed my hand harder against the wall. "He'll need 6 weeks of rehabilitation," she said. "Restricted movement for 3 months. But the trajectory, Rebecca, the trajectory changed." "I know," I said. "He asked for you when he came around. I told him you were working. Tell him I'll call tonight. He knows." A pause. The sound of Lena exhaling. The long version. The one she saved for when something was genuinely over. It's done. Yes, I said. It's done. I stood in the east corridor for 2 minutes after the call, not moving, letting the $67,400 finish becoming the past. The Commendatore found me that evening at the base of the east staircase. He was coming from the direction of the study, jacket on, which meant he had been in a meeting, and slowed when he saw me. I was standing at the framed estate document, the one he had been looking at the night he'd said the debt runs in the other direction. I had not been looking at it consciously. I had simply stopped walking and found myself there. Your brother, he said. Surgery went well, I said. Clean result. Something moved in his expression, the satisfaction of a man whose decision had produced its intended outcome, offered without theater. Good, he said. We stood at the base of the staircase for a moment. Not the study, not the anteroom, the threshold between the private and the operational parts of the house, which was where, I had noticed, the most honest exchanges in this household seemed to happen. Ronaldo tells me the manifest investigation is at a point where the next move requires a public context, he said. The foundation dinner, I said, 2 weeks from Friday. He looked at me. I'm restructuring your role in this household. Effective immediately, your position expands beyond Eduardo's care. You'll be present at household medical decisions, welfare matters affecting the family, and any situation requiring medical assessment or judgment. A pause. Including events where the family is publicly represented. I understood what that meant. Not logistically, in terms of the household's architecture. A nurse who attended a patient was invisible. A person integrated into the household's welfare decisions was not. You're changing my access tier, I said. Your badge will reflect a level 4 household credential, he said. Medical and welfare clearance. It was approved this morning. He reached into his jacket and placed a card on the newel post beside me. The Desideri household crest, my name beneath it, the access tier line reading medical welfare level 4. Below that, a reference code, DHR 0044, Muller. The formal letter follows tomorrow through Ronaldo. I picked up the badge. Different weight than the Holt credential, more specific. The kind of weight that came from a thing being exactly what it said it was. The foundation dinner, I said. Varro will be there. He attends every year, he said. Foundation patron for 6 consecutive years. Then he'll see the new credential. Yes, he said. He will. I looked at the badge, then at him. You're putting me in the room with him deliberately. I'm putting you in the room because you belong in it, he said, with the particular quality of finality he gave things that were not proposals. What Varro makes of that is his problem. I clipped the badge to my lanyard. The Holt logo was gone. The Desideri crest was small and precise, and said everything the other one hadn't. I'll need to know the dress protocol, I said. Signora Gallo will brief you, he said. Thursday appointment with the dressmaker on Via Cantoni. It's arranged. I looked at him. He looked back with the faint quality that was not quite the warmth I had now catalogued and lost twice, but something close to its architecture. The expression of a man who has made a decision about a person and is no longer uncertain about it. All right, I said. He nodded. He went upstairs. I stood at the base of the staircase with the new badge in my hand and thought about Thomas in a recovery room and a fracture that had 2 weeks left on its timeline and a foundation dinner 2 weeks from Friday and a man who had just handed me a credential that made me visible in every room in this city where visibility costs something. I called Thomas at 9. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice still thick with anesthesia, and said my name twice before he said anything else. I know, I said. Rest now. You did this, he said. We did it, I said. Sleep. He slept. I put the phone down and sat in the quiet of my apartment, and thought about $67,400 becoming the past, and what came next, and the specific weight of a badge that said level 4 on a lanyard in a house where levels meant everything. 6 weeks ago, I had been the nurse. Functional, unremarkable, invisible. I was not that anymore. The foundation dinner was held annually at the Palazzo Verani, a building that had been many things in its 400 years, and had settled, in its current iteration, into the role of providing a backdrop serious enough to make charitable giving feel like legacy rather than tax strategy. Signora Gallo briefed me on the evening the way she briefed me on everything. Efficiently, completely, without asking whether I wanted the information. 200 guests, black tie, a charitable component that was genuine, and a social component that was the real purpose. My role was to attend as a household welfare representative, remain available to Eduardo if he required medical assessment. He would be present for the first hour, and represent the Desideri family's interests with appropriate competence. "What I wear," I said. She handed me a card without looking up from her tablet. The dressmaker's address. My Thursday appointment. "It's arranged," she said. "The room will notice. Act accordingly." The dressmaker was a precise, unhurried woman who took measurements in silence and produced 8 days later a dress in dark burgundy, fitted, understated, the kind of clothing that communicated without announcing. I hung it in my apartment and looked at it for a while before bed. The level 4 badge went on the lanyard beside it. 2 days before the dinner, Ronaldo came to find me in the staff anteroom at 9 in the evening. He set a printed call log on the table in front of me. One entry highlighted in yellow, an outgoing call from a Varro logistics administrative line to the Commendatore's private number, a number not publicly listed, known to a short list of people, at 8:47 p.m., 3 days prior. "He called," I said. "The Commendatore took it," Ronaldo said. 12 minutes. He gave me the relevant detail afterward. He placed a second sheet beside the first. A transcript, partial, the Commendatore's reconstruction from memory, flagged in brackets as approximate. I read it. Near the end of the call, Cesare Varro had said, "The nurse takes her medication with the morning tea. She's been doing it since the 2nd week. Green tin on the kitchen counter, left side. The good blend." I looked at the paper. The green tin. Eduardo's tea. The one Signora Gallo had left for me during the rest days. Still hot, timed. The one I had drunk standing at the kitchen counter thinking about Eduardo's wife. No one outside this household knew that detail. It had not been in any report. It had not been discussed in any room with more than 2 people present. Varro had it because someone inside this house, not Prida was gone, had told him. "There's a second source," I said. "We don't know yet," Ronaldo said. "We're looking." He paused. The detail was harmless on its own. He used it to demonstrate reach. Same mechanism as the private sitting room. Show that he can hear inside before the next move. "He's establishing leverage before the dinner," I said. "If we move against him publicly, he wants us to know he has ears we haven't found." "Yes." Ronaldo's expression didn't change. "The Commendatore wants to proceed. Because pulling back confirms he affected us." "Yes." I looked at the transcript. The green tin. Left side. The good blend. "I want to know something," I said. "The tea that morning. Did Eduardo request it be left for me, or did someone else arrange it?" Ronaldo looked at me. A pause that lasted 1 second longer than his pauses usually lasted. "I'll find out." "If the source knew about the tea," I said, "they knew someone left it specifically for me. That narrows the window." He nodded, picked up both sheets, and left. I sat alone in the anteroom and thought about someone watching a small act of kindness and reporting it. Not because it mattered, but because the watching was the point. The watching was always the point with Cesare Varro. He didn't need the information. He needed you to know he had it. The Palazzo Varani received its guests through a main entrance wide enough to make arrival feel like a statement. I arrived with Edoardo. In the family car, Fausto driving, Rinaldo in the front passenger seat, at 7:10. The Commendatore had gone ahead. Edoardo was in a dark suit and moving well, his left side carrying its improved strength with the dignity of a man who had decided that what he had recovered was enough and what remained was his to manage. He took my arm at the entrance, not for support, exactly. The gesture of a man who had decided on a presentation. The room registered us the way these rooms registered everything, noted, recalibrated, resumed. But the pause was longer than a patient, and his nurse warranted. The level 4 badge was at my sternum, the Desideri crest small and precise. The burgundy dress said nothing obvious. Both together said something the room apparently needed a moment to process. The Commendatore found us at 7:25. He moved through the reception with the economy of a man executing protocol, greeting, acknowledgement, repositioning, and reached us near the far end of the first room. He looked at his father first, the medical assessment that happened before everything else. Then at me. 1 second. Contained. Something in it that I filed and did not examine in a room with 200 people. "You look correct," he said, which in this household's language was not faint praise. "Signora Gallo's department," I said. Edoardo made a sound that was almost a laugh. Cesare Varro arrived at 7:50. I recognized him before the room told me who he was, because what Rinaldo had described was entirely legible in how he occupied the space. Mid-50s, well-dressed in the way that required no visible effort, moving through the reception with the ease of a man whose presence was expected and whose absence would have been noted. The face of someone who had inherited a complicated operation and found he was suited to it in ways his father had never anticipated. He did not come to me first. He went to the Commendatore. A greeting. Brief, correct, the social register of two men who had known each other's names for years and had made a mutual agreement not to let that become warmth. I watched from across the room, Edoardo beside me, as the exchange lasted 40 seconds and ended with both men moving in different directions. Then Varro found me. He appeared at my left at 8:03. I noted the time because I had been tracking his position since arrival, the same way I tracked variables in a patient's chart, unhurried. A glass of wine he wasn't drinking. "Miss Muller," he said, conversationally. The tone of a man renewing an acquaintance. I said nothing. "You've settled well," he said. His eyes moved briefly to the badge at my sternum. "Level 4. That's unusual for a clinical role." A pause. "Your brother's recovery. Spinal decompression, wasn't it? I hope the rehabilitation is progressing." He said it with complete social ease. The courtesy of a man who happened to know the specific procedure, the specific family member, the specific trajectory of a private surgical recovery that had never been discussed outside of 2 phone calls and a hospital room. He moved on before I could answer. Back into the current of the room, already in conversation with someone else, the glass of wine still untouched. I kept my expression where it was. Beside me, Edoardo had gone very still. He knew Thomas's procedure, Edoardo said. Low. For me only. "Yes," I said. "That information isn't public." "No," I said. Edoardo looked across the room at Varro's retreating back with the expression of a man who has spent 70 years watching other men reveal themselves and has just watched it happen again. "He wanted you to know he knew," Edoardo said. "That's always been the point," I said. I had my phone in my clutch. I sent Rinaldo a single message. "Varro knows Thomas's procedure. Internal source confirmed active." His reply came in 40 seconds. Noted. "Stay visible." I stayed visible. I took Edoardo out at 8:30 through the Palazzo Varani's East Service Corridor, the family exit, which I had mapped during the Thursday walkthrough Rinaldo had arranged before the dinner. 3 routes in, 2 routes out, 2 camera positions, 1 blind spot near the catering staging area on the lower level. The blind spot was where I saw it. A single medication vial on the secondary preparation table, separated from the catering supplies by 18 inches, which was too deliberate to be accidental. The label faced away from the corridor, also deliberate. I had spent 4 years in clinical environments where medication placement was governed by protocol, and nothing about this placement followed any protocol I had ever been trained in. I stopped. Eduardo felt the change in my pace. "Rebecca." "One moment," I said. I did not touch the vial. I took my phone out and photographed it in position. The table, the label angle, the distance from the catering supplies, the corridor context. Then I moved around the table and read the label without touching it. The medication name was a cardiac glycoside. The concentration listed was 3 times the standard therapeutic dose. Eduardo was on a cardiac glycoside. Had been since admission. His dosage, his schedule, his specific formulation, all of it was in the medical care coordination file. The same file that had been accessed by Preda. The same file that a second, unidentified internal source had been feeding to Varro. I photographed the label. I sent both images to Ronaldo with 4 words. East Service Corridor. Now. Then I put my hand on Eduardo's arm and walked him to the car at the same pace I had been walking him all evening, unhurried, correct, and said nothing until Fausto had the door open and Eduardo was seated. "What was it?" Eduardo said. "A medication vial," I said. "Wrong concentration, wrong location, wrong everything." He held my eyes. "For me." "The formulation matched yours exactly," I said. "The concentration would have been fatal at your body weight within 40 minutes of administration." He was quiet, not frightened. The stillness of a man who has lived long enough to have arrived at situations like this before and has learned that fear is less useful than clarity. "You found it," he said. "I mapped the corridor on Thursday," I said. "I know where things are supposed to be." "Yes," he said. "That's what you do." Fausto got us to the estate in 12 minutes. Ronaldo met us at the service entrance. He had been at the Palazzo Varani within 4 minutes of my message, which meant he had been positioned nearby. He had the vial in an evidence bag. He had already sent its photograph to a forensic contact. "Cardiac glycoside," I said. 3 times therapeutic concentration. "I read the label," he said. "The batch number is from a Varro Logistics pharmaceutical shipment. Same manifest system. The same manifest system. The same reference number structure. Varro had moved the vial through his own supply chain, logged it under a standard delivery entry, and placed it where someone inside the Palazzo Varani's catering operation would have collected it and added it to Eduardo's evening medication tray." "The second internal source," I said. "It's someone in the catering team." "We have the access logs from the staging corridor," Ronaldo said. "We'll have the name by morning." He went inside. I stood at the service entrance for a moment, the night air cold and exact, the city's evening continuing its usual indifference beyond the estate walls. The Commendatore appeared at the gate at 9:40. He had left the dinner early. Ronaldo had reached him within minutes of my message, I understood, and he came through the service entrance with the particular quality of motion I had only seen once before, the night the raid map had been on the desk. Faster than his usual. Controlled. But the speed underneath it visible to anyone who had been watching him long enough to know the difference. He looked at his father first. Eduardo was in the ground floor sitting room with tea. The green tin, left side, the good blend, which Signora Gallo had produced without being asked. He was reading, or performing reading. His hands were steady. The Commendatore stood in the doorway and looked at him for 3 seconds. Then he turned to me. "The vial," he said. "Photographed in position, chain of custody documented from discovery," I said. "Ronaldo has it." The batch number traces to a Varro shipment. The concentration was 3 times Eduardo's prescribed dose. He held my eyes. Something in his expression that was not the controlled assessment I had catalogued over 5 months. Something underneath it, momentarily visible. The specific face of a man understanding what had almost happened, and calculating the distance between almost and did. "You mapped the exit corridor on Thursday," he said. "I map every place I work," I said. He was quiet for 4 seconds. "She's a nobody." Varro had told 3 different people at tonight's dinner. I would learn this from Ronaldo's account of the room intelligence his team had gathered. The nurse. The new credential. The woman the Commendatore had put in the room for reasons nobody could quite explain. She's a nobody. She's decorative. She signed manifests and got lucky. He had said it 4 times. To 4 different people. In the hearing of 2 members of the household's network who had reported it back within the hour. The Commendatore would say it back to him. In the study. On camera. Verbatim, with the weight of everything that had happened between Corridor Aldea and this service entrance behind it. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, he stood in the doorway of his father's sitting room and looked at me across the threshold with the expression he kept for rooms that held people he could not afford to lose. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, without qualification. The plainest thing he had said to me in 5 months. "Good night," I said. I went home with Fausto and sat in my apartment in the dark and thought about a vial on a table and the 4 years of clinical training that had made it visible to me when it would have been invisible to anyone else, and about a man who had put me in that room because he had known, before I fully understood it myself, exactly what I was worth. The 6th rib was at 6 weeks, 2 more to full recovery. Tomorrow, the raid. Ronaldo identified the catering source by 2 a.m., a staging coordinator named Bruni, contracted through a hospitality company that shared, through 2 intermediary registrations, a director with a Varro logistics subsidiary. He had been placed in the Palazzo Verani's catering rotation 4 months prior, long enough to learn the service corridors, the medication tray protocols, the timing of Eduardo's evening schedule. Long enough to be useful exactly once. Ronaldo told me this in the study at 2:15, with the Commendatore at the desk and a raid map of the Varro Logistics Warehouse District open between them. 3 locations marked. The primary warehouse on Via Secca, where the pharmaceutical manifests originated, circled in red. I looked at the map and found the route. Via Secca runs parallel to the Holt Medical Center's service road, I said. The same road that feeds into Corridor Aldea. Varro's been using the same geographic corridor for 2 years. The hospital access points, the loading bays, the covered passages. It's not coincidence. The whole operation is built around that corridor's blind spots. "We know his position inside the warehouse," Ronaldo said. "He didn't go home after the dinner. He's been there since 11. He knows we found the vial," I said. "He assumed we would," the Commendatore said. "He left the vial knowing it would be found eventually. It wasn't the primary plan. It was the contingency." He looked at the map. If Eduardo survived the evening, the vial becomes leverage, proof that the Desideri household's medical staff is compromised, that medications can be intercepted, that no legal action we take can happen without him demonstrating our vulnerabilities first. "He built an exit before he needed it," I said. "Same as the board complaint. Same as the listening device." "Yes." A pause. "Except this exit required my father to die to function." The room held that sentence. "There's a city-owned camera on the Corridor Aldea archway," I said. "It covers the full length of Via Secca's eastern junction. If Varro moves anyone between the warehouse and the hospital corridor tonight, that camera captures it. And it's not in his surveillance plan. I checked the Holt security map on Thursday. He controls the hospital's internal cameras through the logistics contract. He doesn't control the municipal ones." Ronaldo was already on his phone. "And the pharmaceutical manifest system," I said. "The batch number on the vial. Ronaldo said it traces to a Varro shipment. That entry is in the Holt system with a receiving signature and a timestamp." If that batch was logged as delivered to the private patient wing, there's a clinical record that places it inside Eduardo's care chain. That's not just evidence of the vial. It's evidence of the supply chain Varro has been running through that wing for years. You can access the Holt manifest system, the Commendatore said. Level 4 credential gives me clinical records access, I said, including historical manifests. I looked at him. Give me 20 minutes and I'll pull every entry that batch number appears in. He looked at me for 2 seconds. Then, do it. I pulled the records on Ronaldo's office terminal. 23 entries. The batch number appeared in 11 of them, spanning 14 months, each logged under standard delivery protocols, each carrying a receiving signature. 3 of the signatures were mine, the same 3 I had verified before. The remaining 8 were other Holt staff members, none of them aware of what they had signed for. The 11th entry, the most recent, was dated the morning after the Palazzo Verani dinner, time-stamped 4:56 a.m. It had been logged from inside the warehouse on Via Secca. He logged the vial as delivered this morning, I said. After the dinner, before we moved. He's building his own counter-record, Ronaldo said, trying to establish that the vial was a legitimate pharmaceutical delivery that was tampered with after the fact, by someone inside the Desideri household. By me, I said. You have access to the manifest system, Ronaldo said. He knows that. Level 4 credential. He saw the badge at the dinner. He's constructing a version where the nurse with manifest access and a history of Holt employment is the one who placed the vial. I looked at my 3 signatures in the entry log. My name, my credential number, my timestamps. The architecture of a frame built from the exact materials of my own competence. The municipal camera on Corridor Aldea, I said. The timestamp on that footage will show whether anyone moved through that corridor between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. If it does, it disproves the delivery log. You can't have a legitimate pharmaceutical delivery logged at 4:56 a.m. from a warehouse that had no verified movement in or out. Ronaldo relayed this. His contact pulled the feed. At 5:30 a.m., the footage confirmed 3 Varro operatives moving through the Corridor Aldea junction at 4:41, 17 minutes before the manifest timestamp. Not delivering, repositioning, moving away from the warehouse, not toward the hospital. The delivery log was fabricated. The timestamp was impossible. The frame had a 17-minute gap in it that the municipal camera had been recording all night. East approach, Ronaldo said, reading his phone. Team is in position. The Commendatore looked at the clock on the study wall. 5:38. 2 minutes, he said. The raid moved at 5:40. I know the time because I was standing at Ronaldo's office window looking at the service corridor clock. The same clock face, the same numerals, the same position as the morning of Corridor Aldea. 5:40, and the city outside was holding its breath the way it had held it then, before the light decided to arrive. The warehouse on Via Secca was secured in 9 minutes. Ronaldo's team, the Commendatore's legal representatives, and 2 investigators from the unit that operated in the space between official authority and Desideri reach. Varro's operatives were documented on the municipal camera footage and met at the warehouse perimeter before they could reposition. Lena had been followed since the dinner. I did not know this until 5:47, when Ronaldo's second team reported that a Varro operative had been maintaining surveillance on her apartment building since 9 p.m. He had been there when the primary team moved. He surrendered without incident when he understood what surrounded him. A single man who had been watching a paralegal's apartment building and had not been told that the operation he was part of was already over. She called me at 5:52. There was someone outside, she said, the tight, functional voice. A man. Police came. Not police exactly, I said. Are you all right? Yes. A pause. Were you expecting this? I was hoping it wouldn't be necessary, I said. I'm sorry. Don't be. Her voice shifted, the compressed version of something larger. Is it over? Almost, I said. One more thing. Cesare Varro was brought to the Commendatore's study at 6:20. He came in the way he entered every room, with the ease of a man whose arrival was its own statement. He looked at the desk, at the recording device in the corner, at the documents laid out in a precise row, at me, standing to the left. He had come prepared. A leather case, a counter document, a manufactured record alleging that the vial had been placed by a Desideri household employee with manifest access and a documented history at the Holt Medical Center. My name. My credential number. My 3 signatures. He set it on the desk with the composed certainty of a man who had built this architecture before he needed it. "Before anything proceeds," he said, "I'd suggest considering what a full disclosure produces for all parties." The Commendatore said nothing. I opened the terminal. I turned the screen toward Varro and walked him through it. The 11 manifest entries, the batch number, the 4:56 a.m. timestamp on the fabricated delivery log, and the municipal camera footage showing his operatives moving through Corridor Aldea at 4:41, 17 minutes before the timestamp, moving away from the hospital, not toward it. The frame had a gap in it, and the gap was on camera, and the camera was not his. Then I laid the imaging report on the desk, the radiology film beside it, the urgent care documentation from day 1, the transfer confirmation, the board complaint dismissal, every time-stamped document from the past 5 weeks, each one in sequence, each one predating and disproving every element of the counter record he had built. Varro looked at the documents. The composed certainty did not shatter. It receded, the tied version, without drama. The Commendatore looked at him across the desk. "She's a nobody," he said. Exactly as Varro had said it, verbatim, at the same conversational register, with the weight of everything in the room behind it. "That's what you told 4 people at the dinner last night. The nurse, decorative, got lucky." Varro said nothing. "She found the vial in a corridor she had mapped 3 days earlier," the Commendatore said. "She pulled the manifest records that disproved your delivery log. She identified the camera your surveillance plan didn't account for. A pause, precise and inhabited. She did all of it with a healing rib fracture you caused in a covered passage 5 weeks ago because you decided she was nobody worth noticing." The room was very quiet. Varro looked at the recording device, at the screen, at the documents, at the 17-minute gap that had been sitting in the municipal camera's memory all night, patient and exact, waiting to be found by someone who knew where to look. He opened the leather case. He took out a second document, not the counter record. A single page. The surrender terms, which Ronaldo's legal team had prepared and delivered to the warehouse before the raid. He had known they would be coming. That was his competence, anticipating the shape of a loss before it arrived and positioning to minimize it. He read the page with the attention of a man confirming the boundary of what he was giving up. He looked up at me once, not at the Commendatore, at me. Then he signed. On camera. In the Commendatore's study, 6:38 a.m., the city turning toward its morning outside the window, the iron gray of pre-dawn replaced by the first specific gold of a day that had taken all night to arrive. Lena came through the service entrance at 7:15, brought in by Fausto from her apartment. She came through the door and looked at me and said nothing, just crossed the corridor and held on, and I let her, my chin against her shoulder, and my left hand pressed carefully against my side. "Thomas called," she said into my hair. 6 a.m. "He said to tell you the right hand isn't shaking this morning." I closed my eyes. "First time in 8 months," she said. We stood in the service corridor while the household settled around us into its morning. Signora Gallo somewhere above, the kitchen beginning its sounds, the particular quality of a house resuming after a long night. "Is it over?" Lena said. I thought about the signed document, the gap in the footage, the vial in an evidence bag, and the manifest trail that would take Varro's operation apart 1 entry at a time. The 6th rib at 6 weeks, 2 from full recovery, and a badge with level 4 on the lanyard, and a reference number that had not existed 2 months ago. Yes, I said. She exhaled. I exhaled with her. Above us, through the ceiling, I heard Eduardo's morning movement beginning. The particular sound of a man in his chair by the window, beginning another day in the direction of recovery. I went upstairs. Tell me something in the comments. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it Corridor Aldea at 5:40? The vial on the table? Or the Commendatore saying her own words back to Varro in that study? Drop your answer below, and tell me where in the world you're listening from. I want to know how far Rebecca's story traveled. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.